All right, everybody. We are live. I am so excited today to be live with my podcaster friends. There are so many more that you literally can't even fit on the screen, obviously, that I know, but I thought of these five because all of their messages are so powerful, out in the universe, so special. And there's so much energy they put out there, and so I just thought this is what I want to do. I want to bring all the podcasters on. I want to talk about what's going on in the world, what our experiences are, and so let me introduce you. So we got Kevin Monroe. Kevin Monroe is the host of the Higher Purpose podcast, and I have been on his show, and he is amazing. He knows how to bring out just amazing things from inside of people they never knew was in there. So. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
This way.
Sarah Elkins. Yeah. Sarah Elkins, Your Stories Don't Define You podcast, and with a book coming out by the same title shortly. And she is, I consider her my sis. So we have gone back now for some multiple years. She is just, when you're talking about a storyteller extraordinaire, you have got to get to know Sarah. If you don't, and you should subscribe to her podcast. And then we've got Gary Turner. You'll see him right in the middle. I don't even know if you can see him the way I'm seeing him, but right in the middle on the bottom. He has the Value Through Vulnerability podcast, boosted by Humans First. And that title fits him just perfectly because he delivers value by revealing the vulnerability in the people that are on his show and just anybody around him. And he also has recently become more vulnerable himself. And so maybe he'll talk a little about that because I love that journey. I think it's worthwhile telling. And then we have Greg Brenner, who is on the left, right below me, I guess. And he's got the Everyday People podcast. I've been on his show as well. Actually, I've been on Gary's show. I just realized that, except for Sarah, I've been on everybody's show. I love all of you. And Greg, what I love about you, well, you have an HR background, but you talk to people about lots of different things. And you're in Miami, right?
I am in Miami. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, and so I would love to be. All my family would like to be in Miami right now. So I'm in Colorado. Forgot to say where everybody else is at, but we can talk about that in a minute. But anyway, I'm glad to have you on as well. And then lastly, but not least, the podcast guy, Adam Posner, and his is called The Podcast. And if you ever see his podcast, you'll see he puts out this kind of really cool, I don't even know what you want to call image of each of the people that have been on the show. Whatever we call that, holograph. Animation. I love it.
Holograms would be cool, though. Yeah, if I could do holograms, that'd be cool. Special.
You're already special in lots
of
ways.
I hear that a lot. Thank you.
The bonds don't eat the paste kind of special.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look real fast because the one thing that StreamYard does not do is it does not give you like comments or anything inside of the stream. So I have to kind of go in here.
It does if you're streaming on other platforms aside from LinkedIn. It does pull in Facebook and other ones too, but not
exactly.
LinkedIn.
Not LinkedIn, which is irritating. I'm like, that's the main one I'm going to be doing streaming on. But so I can't really see. But okay, whoever's out there in the world, please tell us who you are, where you're coming from, and also put in there just why you joined. So tell us why you joined, and then I'll look at some of those comments and we'll come back to those as well. So where you're at, your name, and of course, why you decided to join this particular broadcast. Okay. So one of the things that's just become real obvious to me is that all of us right here are a huge, like we have so much knowledge. There's so much awareness and connection and our brains. I mean, it's just crazy because of all the people we talk to. Right. So we are so rich in knowledge and experience because of all the people we talk to. We're all great in ourselves, I think, and in and of ourselves. But I think in the end, it's all the people we talk to. So what I want to talk about is just riff a little bit on some of the things that we've been hearing related to the time that we're in right now. And it could be any message you want. So, I have not kind of pre-thought this through. I just want you to kind of share. And from my perspective, so I talk on my podcast, I talk to leaders, people who are managing people. So that's kind of the prerequisite. You have to have a team of people that you're managing inside an organization right now, inside your home, remotely, probably managing people. And so some of the things that I've been hearing are, a fear about, oh my gosh, when we go back to work, what does this look like? Especially if we are an organization that either had to lay people off, we had to furlough people. what then? What is the culture going to feel like? What's going to happen, and how should we do this, and how should we communicate this? And so, we've been going back and forth on some of those things. And also, I was speaking to someone who is a chairman of a bank out in New York, and he was saying that, and I agree, because it's so much now about the golden rule. It's more about the golden rule right now, whether you're a faith-based person or not. It boils down to this. Are you empathizing with people? Are you putting yourself in their shoes? How are you treating your people right now? How are you showing up now? Because it's going to impact what it's going to look like sometime, a year, 6 months down the road for your business. I'd love to hear thoughts on some of that, and maybe your thoughts on those, and then also any additional thoughts or things you've been hearing. Let's go to Kevin.
Okay, thanks. Well, Heather, it's a joy to be here with friends and fellow podcasters. And I don't know if you have thought of it, but today, it was actually 7 weeks ago today that the WHO declared the global pandemic. So this is day 49.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah.
Cake and cookies later.
Day
Gosh.
49. And I think when it started, I think many of us had thought, oh, we can do this for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks at the that's a stretch. But here we are. It's been, 7 weeks and no sign coming. So I think what I would say, Heather, when I first started, it was like, okay, what is all this about? And then I had a commitment from episode 1, and we just released episode 144 yesterday. So episode 1 was to keep it real. That was a commitment I made. And so to keep it real, we have to talk about what's going on in our lives in every episode. Now, yesterday was the first episode that we really kind of devoted the whole episode to this topic. I had a guest who's written a book on the power of healthy tension. So yesterday we talked about 3 tensions we are all managing as we try to get through this. But in all of the other episodes leading up to that, it was just kind of, let's start by how are you now? To me, that I found that now is one of the most important ways to ask that question. I had a friend call me this morning and ask me that. He's a guy that's been on my podcast, will be again soon. And he said, how are you now, Kevin? Right. And I'm like, well, now, if you'd asked me that yesterday, it was a different answer. So how are you now? And really just wanting to provide people hope that we will get through this. And the way we'll get through it is together. And I've got a story that I'll tell, but I want to save that. I don't want to go into all that now. Let's spread this around.
Yes. Okay. So Sarah, what about you?
Well, I've kind of had a similar aha moment over the past, aha moments over the past couple of weeks about making sure that we're being really present. And when you said, if you had asked me yesterday, it might have been different. If you had asked me 10 minutes ago, it might have been different. So one of the things I started very early on, I have the luxury of living in a beautiful mountain town in Montana. And I'm literally 2 blocks away from one of the largest city parks, natural city parks in the country. So I walk 2 blocks up my alley and I'm in nature, and big, wild nature. It's a 1,000-foot climb to the summit of the mountain behind my house. And early on, I started doing these 30 seconds of calm videos from different places around where I can go easily without running into other people. And the first couple times I did it, it was for me. It was like, okay, I'm going to do this on Instagram because it's going to make me stop and be present for 30 seconds. And for somebody as hyperactive as I am, 30 seconds, it was kind of hard, 30 seconds. And now I've gotten up to a minute in some cases. So I'm kind of proud of myself. But I started doing it for me. And then I started hearing from people in New York City, in Manhattan and Queens, from people in LA, from people in parts of Minnesota, that they were so grateful to have those 30 seconds to just stop and breathe and be present. So I've continued to do that, and I've done it in a few different ways and a few different places, but mostly they take place on the mountain behind my house. And just like Kevin, with all of my podcast guests, the topic always comes up, but then we really try to talk about being here now rather than thinking about the future or the past and what's going to happen, because we can't know.
That's rich. What about you, Greg? You in Miami?
Well, we have no mountains, and we have, I think for me and on my podcast, we haven't gone full in COVID, but my podcast is based on everyday people and their stories, and so naturally, my interviews lately have been touching upon it, and I think I just found that, it's been amazing, kind of the whirlwind people have gone through, right, and so certainly on the shock, and I think I don't know if there's many people that didn't like with those first week or two, like what is going on, and if you have a family, you're like, you're trying to be that person to kind of hold people together, and you're thinking to yourself, what is this? This is like preparation that you would get from what you must feel a nuclear attack would be. It's like, it's crazy. And then quickly we found people, and our message is very positive and trying to be upbeat and to everybody's point is really kind of finding this hope and this presence and this using empathy in our world. And that gets really tested when you're up against it. And then you throw in all the things that are happening from, when we talk layoffs, and I'm in the HR world and furloughs, I look at that as those are people behind every one of those statistics. Yeah. And we forget that, right? And so the message is of there's a person that went from having, work and pay and that's gone, or they're temporarily paused. And I understand why certain companies had to do what they do. It's survival mode. And then those realities for those people having to feed their families and things of that nature. So what we've tried to do is really shift into a place of hope and empathy and understanding what the everyday person is going through. And when you do that, you think about things differently. And then from that, we shifted into, and I've had a lot of conversations with people lately, in the opportunity of today. All right. And it shifts your mind from all the crap and stuff and the heaviness and this, my kids are at home and and all these things, to there are great opportunities in that at home. I know for us personally, we're cooking dinners. We're sitting down at a table together with no devices and talking about stuff without a TV on or anything, just having family time. It's been fantastic. That's an opportunity, right? We have people that are hurting, that had businesses that were here, and all of a sudden, boom, it's gone. All right, what's the opportunity to learn from this? So when we're faced with this again, how do we prepare ourselves to be in a little bit better position? And who's kind of winning, which is a bad term, but who's winning right now as opposed to who's really struggling right now, and those lessons that are there. So I think there's so many waves, and Kevin says it right, just how are you now? Well, right now we're on that piece of, we figured this out. We've gone through this transition where most of us are working at home. Thank goodness for the people that are on the front lines, caring for this stuff, and in our grocery stores and hospitals and everything else like that. But everybody else is now, they're ready to be turned loose. And we just have to be mindful of that, and we'll get through this together. And that's really been the messages of people that I've been speaking with. So it's been very, very positive. At the same time, understanding there's some oblique moments that are going on right now.
How about you, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's really summed it up so nicely here, and everyone's going through unique experiences. But this is the first time, I mean, in my 41 years of living on this earth, that everyone on this planet has a same. We're all in this together. Everything is canceled. And listen, depending on your socioeconomic, geographical location, everyone has a different situation right now. But for me specifically, and it's kind of funny because my wife always says, you could handle the most insane, crazy pandemic stuff, like no sweat at all. But for example, yesterday, the remote control broke in my living room and I lost my mind. I lost my mind because I went on Amazon and the earliest this thing next one could come is next Wednesday. I'm like, I can't access my Netflix without the remote. And I was literally bright red and angry, yet everything else going on, my business being down 50% year over year and all that other stuff too, I take in stride. And I look at everything, as Greg said, as an opportunity. And for me, that opportunity was really about taking my brand, my recruitment business, and and my content side, to the next level, and really using my content, my podcast, my live show to really drive engagement via having conversations with amazing folks in my industry. So I've been utilizing the live shows. So before the pandemic hit, I was doing probably like once a week on the live. And now I've been doing it daily, which has done a couple of things. First, it's keeping me sane and keeping me busy with all the planning, the prep work that goes into it, the research, the graphics, the creative, the promotion. That's keeping me sane and my mind focused on something. And two, more importantly, I'm able to have conversations with amazing folks, like some of them here down below, where I could get different perspectives from a personal side, how people are handling things during the situation, tips, tricks, what's working for them, what's not working. And secondly, from the professional side, I mean, I have HR folks, recruiters, talent pros, resume people. So we're talking real-time actionable tips and insights, how folks who are in the job search, who are struggling right now, mental health folks, how people can have actionable advice right now. And for me, that's the listening, that's the learning, that's the osmosis, which is working out great. And then you take it to the next level, from my business side, all that content is doing a few things. One, building up my content library that I could put out and promote, but it's also growing, my brand. So, not just gaining followers, but gaining fans, people that are actually interested in the content and the guests that I'm promoting. So I went, all in on it. It's a lot of work. It's going to pay off. And I also think when I come out of it from my company perspective, it's more name recognition, business development, having, future prospects on. And, it's all good here. All good here, positive. We all have our moments. We all have our moments of insanity and when we break down. But, one of the things I talk about a lot on my show, I end every episode, whether it be a recorded podcast or a live show, with asking my guests for a professional and personal silver lining. I really want to see the light that's coming out of it. It's just so many amazing stories and just sharing that with everyone.
Love it. Before we move to Gary, let me just see who's on and say hi to them. And then I'm going to ask them a question, and then we'll go on to the great Gary Turner. So Andrew Mead, hello there from Seattle. Thanks, Andrea. I don't see her on here, but thank you. I'm glad that she sent you my way. That's awesome. Bo, joining from South Africa, learning about the world of work and the pandemic, and hopefully we'll shed some light on that. And Stephanie, hi there, and Michelle. I don't know who else is on there, but if you're on there, tell us where you're from and also why you joined. And one question I want to ask you, so go ahead and answer that in the comments right now. And it is, are you feeling more or less stressed right now, given our current stay-at-home environment? More or less stressed? I'd be curious to see the answers to that as well. All right, Gary.
Well, all I can say, I can tell that Adam used to work with Gary Vee. Let's just leave that there for a second. But anyway, back to my podcast.
There wasn't one curse word. I don't know how you figured that out.
I'm keeping this one clean.
Well, first of all, thanks very much for the invite, Heather. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, by the way. But I think for me, like the podcast has always been about unleashing humanity. And it sounds really grandiose, but it literally is, the introduction is putting the human back into humanity. That's why the podcast existed 2 years ago. And that's why it exists today. And I think, building on what everyone else has said so far, Heather, I felt an energetic shift in the podcast since episode 100. And what I mean by that is pragmatic optimism. So I would have said before that, the conversations were great. They were detailed. They were helpful. But they weren't always, linking to Adam's point, they didn't necessarily offer like an invitation to go and do this or try that or experiment with this. It was great. It was great conversations, but I don't think we invited people in as much as we are now. And the richness, Heather, of the last 8 episodes, it's off the charts. Like people talking about, like Tom van der Lubbe was talking about how he's actively avoiding layoffs right now. Like real life, in the moment stories of how co-founders are trying to avoid layoffs. And it just feels more meaningful. And it's a conversation that people want to listen into. And I think that's what I'm excited about. And I see it with everyone else on this screen right now is I'm super optimistic. Like there's a lot of hope out there. The conversations on the podcast around the belief systems, Heather, that have been shattered overnight. I agree with that. Like we have got this collective meditative state right now where we're all in the same sort of situation. And we've actually got a choice how we emerge from it. And they're the conversations we're having on the podcast right now is, what do we want the next step to look like? We can't control it, but we can sure as hell show up in a different way, maybe than we did 5, 6, 8 weeks ago. And what choice do we want to make around that? And they're the conversations we're having right now, and it's really, really exciting.
Wow, that's powerful. It's like going back.
Can I add something, Heather?
Go ahead,
can I
Sarah.
add something to that? Because this just kind of popped into my head, is that I've, of course, participated with lots of Zoom meetings. And what's been really interesting is that my coaching clients, so I'm a communication coach, and clearly that's a really big part of what's going on now, is adjusting your communication, because we don't have the face-to-face ability to see the subcontext of a conversation through the body language and the facial expressions. So my coaching clients are seeing their colleagues, their peers, in such a different way right now, in very positive ways, because they are seeing the humanity of their colleagues. It's not just a name, it's not just a person down the hallway in an office. And I'm finding great beauty in that they see their kids, they see their pets, they hear the dog barking, and even their boss has a different side to her or to him that's showing now, that they wouldn't have seen because they're in their home now, right? And I just find that to be so beautiful, to see how people are starting to see each other in more human light and less transactional.
Truly seeing people. It's one of the things that when I think about the crux of the work that even like some of the stuff that Gary and Kevin and I do, particularly in this human space, it is about truly seeing people. And it's not always pretty. And that's okay. That's who we are as humans. And we have to take that in. We have to rest in that, right? And so I know that as a leader, as someone who led teams before, and now the kind of direction I try to give people is, after this, before this we should have, but that's okay. I'm not going to should on people. It's what we do now afterward. We have to truly see people. So Sarah, I think you're spot on. What are we seeing? And if we don't see the pretty stuff, it's there. It's just the way it is. And how do we respond to that, right? Let me look really quick to the comments, because there were people that Bo said he feels more stress, more pressure to perform as I work in projects I kind of expected, but not the pace of projects that are coming in. But Andrew says he feels less pressure to perform and less stress. And then let's see. And then one person said, what should the new normal look like now? So that's probably a good question for all of us to be, I'd like to, anybody who wants to say that first, let's just do it.
Well, one quick thing I just want to jump in. I saw a stat, I forgot where it's from yesterday, that Americans are working more than ever, hours wise, because there's not a clear delineation between starting your day, ending your day, taking your lunch break, not knowing when to stop, not knowing when to start. And it's absolutely incredible. So the productivity is going through the roof, but at the same time, stress and burnout are as well. And that's something that I think everybody really needs to be mindful of. 100%, just being mindful of when you start your day, when you end your day, and creating boundaries, and taking those timeouts. I mean, for example, yesterday I saw, I use a lot of block and tackling in my schedule. I block off time for my business work, podcast work, and then family time as well. And I saw a clear opening and a clear sky yesterday around 4:00, and I ended my day. 4:00 on the dot, I ended my day. I spent the time with my family. So I think it's really important that everyone, really takes those timeouts, right, for your own mental health. And I think that's something, we could all apply here.
It's great.
Yeah, and I think the stress is it comes in waves. I think early on there was a lot of stress, and then certainly if you're dealing with financial things, there's a lot of stress that goes with that. I can tell you in my own situation, I had a panic attack like a week and a half into this thing that I didn't realize it was a panic attack, but I diagnosed myself. I went on WebMD, and so now I know what it is. But I was getting ready for bed, and all of a sudden the room just started spinning. I mean, just spinning. And I got to bed. I was like, man, for about 20 minutes, the world was spinning. And I wasn't even showing emotion, because, when you show up in leadership and you lead groups of people, you have this kind of persona that you're putting out there. I like to make sure that it's authentic. So there's very rare what you see with me in person or online or on these things than you see with me when you're talking with me one-to-one with no camera on. It's very, very much the same person, but it just kind of attacked me, and I was like, damn, it kind of shook me for a minute, and I finally calmed down and stuff like that. But then it's just like, all right, I didn't even see it. I didn't feel it coming, and I didn't feel it building up. And so what it turned me into that we have, and I think what kind of triggered it is that we have this great opportunity to lead, right? And we have a great opportunity to, what everybody said here, to help people through this. And every single one of us on this call are people, as much as we, whatever term you want or kind of deal you want to stereotype us with, we believe in the power of people. And when you do that, you have a great opportunity to lead differently. As far as the new normal, I just look at it as just an evolution. We're out this, to the start of this if we're at 7 weeks, those are when habits are built, but once we're allowed to kind of venture out and get out there and start doing things, will we go right back to where we were? And I think that's really the telling tale of it. Will it be a new normal or not? Now, the flood of what happens financially and economically after this remains to be seen. And will it be a tidal wave right back to where we were as far as growth and things of that nature? Or will it be a year or two of really tough times? That remains to be seen. But we have that great opportunity to do that. So I don't look at it as this is a new norm and whatever else like that. I do look at it as being true to who you are and continue to grow and move forward. And the people that have figured out to be authentic and do those things, they're winning right now. The people that have not done that with their consumers or whatnot, I love it. I saw a meme the other day of the airlines there was one airline that said, "We're here for you during COVID-19, blah, blah, blah." And the question below was, "Where were you when my suitcase was 50.5 ounces?" And that type of thing, right? And so now you're here for me. And there's great people in the airline industry. However, they've been notoriously not really in the passengers, deal. So it's a great opportunity for us.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I think about, this idea of what I said earlier, shooting on people, but the idea of giving myself grace and trying to give others grace, because none of us are perfect. And what happens is, and this idea of like everybody saying, "I'm here for you," maybe they weren't in the past. I mean, and they weren't. And that's the truth. But maybe we can give, and what I want to tell people is to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're trying. They're trying now. It starts now, today. And like we all get an opportunity to start over every day and to be a better person, every day. And so, yeah, I want to give them, in my mind, I want to be like, yeah, you weren't there before. But at the same time, it's like, shoot, we're starting over at this one place right now. And we just have to try to show up our best. And it's going to go up and down. It's going to be ebb and flows like it normally is, right? Okay, before we go to the next person, let me just make sure I'm looking at some of the comments. So Michelle says, "At times I feel paralyzed. I'm starting a new business and can't seem to get on a great schedule with my college student back home, senior in high school, and a 12-year-old. That's one. That's a reality, right?
Yep.
Andrew, who I know lost his wife a few weeks ago because of the unprecedented situation. We are all on a learning curve. We need to find our own boundary when it comes to work and home life." And then Job says that work from home seems to be more supported now than ever before. Before I open up to any responses, I want to ask those who are on now listening and watching one more question, and that is: do you feel more connected or less connected during these times? Answer that in the comments for us. Okay, we'll come back to that.
What a great question.
All right. So who wants to respond to some of those other things I just talked about, about the idea of working from home, being more open, or, folks that are just paralyzed and can't seem to get ahead on? Gary, you want to go with that?
Yeah, I think linked to the new normal thing as well, Heather. I think we need to remember that the only new normal we can create is our own. Like, it's a quite big beast out there. And I think we can get quite consumed by the big picture, the big system, how can it all be better? Don't want to go backwards. And I think there's a lot of power in actually, how do we want to show up? What are our values? What decisions do we want to make? Like, who are we going to spend our money with after this crisis? Who's looked after people? Who hasn't? And I just think there's some real opportunity for us to show up differently. as we come out of this crisis. I think we've probably got a best opportunity in probably generations to genuinely shift some of the systemic challenges that we're dealing with in community than we have done as long as I've been on this planet. And that's something that's coming up for me around the new normal, is what do we want the new normal to be, and what are we going to do to help create that?
I think for me, I love those comments, Gary, to build on those, and also the idea of new normal. Let's focus on now, right? We need to get through this together now. And what comes out on the other side, it's way too early for us to know that. And we all, to your point, Gary, we all have an opportunity to shape that individually and collectively. One phrase that I'll introduce that came early on, so 4 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to air a conversation with Bob Chapman, CEO of Barry Waymiller. And we had a very different conversation. We were going to talk about truly human leadership. And we had the opportunity to frame that. What does that look like now as we're going through this, right? Not just kind of what it looked like 3 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago at that time now, but what does it look like now? What does that bring to us? And Bob used a phrase that I just loved, and I think it's relevant to anyone listening, everyone listening. And it's, what are you doing for those in your span of care? We all have a span of care, whether that's just our immediate family, that's certainly in our span of care, or if you're in a leadership role in the organization, you may have dozens of people, hundreds of people, or thousands of people in your span of care. And Bob uses that word very differently than span of control or span of influence. And he shared the story of asking executives, how many people are in your span of care? And it just took them, it was a little different for them to answer. They had to think about it. So the question is that I would pose is, how are you caring for the people in your span of care now? And how we're caring for them now is going to really affect how they respond to us later. And if they don't feel cared for now, hey, your engagement, whatever you thought that was before, it's shot. And you have a real opportunity to change engagement if you care for people now. And people are responding, and people are going, wow, my leaders, they care for me. They demonstrated that care for me through connection. They made opportunities. They were intentional about connecting with me when I had the opportunity to be disconnected. And they started the conversations by asking about me and my family, and what are you dealing with today? And is there something you need that we can help provide? I mean, there's so many opportunities, but I'm really focused on the now. Let's get through this, and then let's see what emerges from it. But to pontificate of what the new normal is going to be, that's ignoring a lot of the suffering that people are dealing with now.
So I interviewed a guy probably 3 weeks into all this, and it was right before Easter. And he said that he used the phrase new normal, but he also said, I'm going to try to make Easter as normal as possible for my kids. And I laughed. I said, why? They're far more resilient than we are.
So true.
How about you create new traditions? You do something completely different than you would have normally done, because this isn't normal. It's not normal. So how about you do something completely different and acknowledge that this isn't normal? And as far as being frozen, was it Andrea that said sometimes she's paralyzed in fear? I love how Kevin said that. We can talk about how we want to shape the future, but it's how we show up right now that's going to impact how we shape the future. So if you, just like eating that, I get frustrated with the whole eating the elephant analogy metaphor, because who's going to eat an elephant, really? But the whole idea of you're going to do it one bite at a time. And when you feel paralyzed, I totally get that. Give yourself grace for that. But then what's one thing that you can do in 15 minutes that will unsnap that paralyzation?
Yes, you guys know I talked about this in my TED Talk, and this is exactly that thing where we have to rest in this. You have to rest in, so that some of that paranoia or the panic that we had, we have to sit in it and go, okay, how do I move past it? But at the same time, recognize you're in it, and you have to you can't ignore that. That's
Right.
so unhealthy. So we can't, I didn't even when I come on here, I never want it to be about, oh, this is like, unicorns and butterflies and chirping. This is not what this is
Hell
about.
no.
We are living in a very strange reality. And it is exactly what we do right now.
I think it's also understanding that people are in different phases of this thing. I know people that have lost loved ones. People have died alone on ventilators. There's been sickness and businesses that were thriving 7 weeks ago are on the verge of death as well, on life support. And so, people are going to react differently to different situations. And it gets back to your point, Heather, on the airlines is giving people the opportunity to show up the way they need to show up. At the same time, understand that this is very real for some people, especially when you're talking about loss of life. And then if you're talking about loss of business, of all the blood, sweat, and tears you've put into that, and then all of a sudden you're in these roaring times, and then all of a sudden, boom, the bottom falls out. It is, I feel for every single person we interact in on my podcast, and then, on my following on LinkedIn, you can feel the, quote unquote influencers that are out there. They don't even know what to say. It's like, I've been influencing, and now you see people that are just retreated, and that's understandable as well. So understanding that you're different, and how do you pull yourself out of it? And then also, how can I help, and how do I help, to your all points, in my span of care, or how do I do this better from a leadership perspective, regardless of your title, becomes really, really important. But give people the space to be the way they are right now.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I know we have more people. Oh, go ahead.
I would just really encourage people to start thinking about the experiences that they're having right now in terms of very specific details. Maybe jot down notes. I'm not suggesting everybody start journaling, but it can be really helpful to start jotting down a phrase or something periodically, so that you have the stories that you need to share in the future from this experience.
A couple people said about the connection. They feel, I feel less connected because of the physical interaction. It's a kind of part of our makeup, and we need to learn how to adapt to that. And someone else said, I feel more connected to people and colleagues because people are more available than they ever were before, which is very, very true in my experience. Andrew says, to me, it's real in the moment and the time, but the reality will change. Yeah.
It's just fascinating that we're more connected now, virtually than we were in person. And I really just hope when we get back to it, we could, keep all those things going. But going back to what we were talking about before about the new norm. I mean, I hate that expression. Actually, it's just going to be is what it is. We talk about leadership and how tough it is if you're, a decision maker within an organization. How do you balance, optimism with rationale and realism, right? And how do you balance the fact that, listen, I'm taking New York City out of the equation because we're a completely different beast here as far as how, when, where we're going to open back up. We're literally on top of each other. But there's going to be folks who just aren't comfortable yet going back into an office, right? And how are leaders going to respond from an understanding and an empathy standpoint? How are they going to understand that someone really, they may not be bullshitting, they really may not feel comfortable there? Or on the other side of it, maybe there's some people that are just not productive at home for a multitude of reasons, and they're rushing to get back to the office because they care so much about their job and their loyalty and all that. Like, there's so many different angles here, so many unprecedented pieces here that we've never had to encounter before. I try to ask those questions on my show, when I'm talking to HR leaders, when I'm talking to people leaders, decision makers too. And the answer is they don't know. They really don't know because the playbook has never been written, right? It's blank pages too. And I think looking back on this, we're going to set so many new precedents, and the playbook is going to be written after this, and hopefully for the better. Hopefully we don't revert back to all those, old ways of management and how we treat people. And the other piece too is working from home. Another piece too, like there's lots of companies that have not allowed work from home because of a trust factor, right? They have not trusted their employees. And I hope this truly shows that you can trust those employees. And you know what? There are going to be ones that have not performed well during this time, either A, because they don't have the logistics set up, they're homeschooling kids, they can't be productive. And let's be real here, there are going to be some people who just kind of threw in the towel for some reasons, and maybe you've kind of, recalibrated some talent within your organization. So really looking at all of it from a positive, from a negative, and all the different angles when we come out of it.
I'd love to add to that, Heather, if I may.
Yes.
To build on what Adam said. Like what we've got right now is the ultimate practice ground for vulnerability. That's the name of my podcast. Yeah, like if you're not used to not saying I don't know, or you're not used to asking for help, do it now, because you can build that muscle over the next couple of weeks, the next few weeks, and like get used to it, because it is a superpower of our time. Like every person we speak to on the podcast says the moment that they can step into it and allow to show a bit more of their true selves, it doesn't have to be everything, just a bit more of their humanity, the challenge, the struggle, the difficulty. It invites other people in every single time, Heather. And I think right now is a great opportunity to practice vulnerability. It really is.
For those who are watching and listening right now, in the comments, if you could respond to this one question, what would be the one thing that something that you've added, or something you've experienced during this time that you do not want to go away or get rid of after we're able to start marching around in our communities again? So what is the thing that you want to keep after this is all said and done? Okay, so one of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking about that with leaders is that'll be part of like some of us, we do advise leaders and the role that they play in this transition back to the office. And you raised some really good points. And so I'd be curious to know for everybody that's here, what piece of advice would you give those people who are the decision makers who have to help with transition back into the workplace for those who've been at home now? Sarah?
Oh, gosh. I guess my first piece of advice would be to ask them what they need to be successful and productive. What do you need from me? What tools can I give you to be productive and successful in your job? And that should be a question that's asked all the time, but particularly now, because it can be, I need to continue to work from home. As Adam said, I may not be comfortable, or my kids are still at home. I mean, we may open things up and send people back to work, but their kids are not going back to school this semester. So what do you need from me to be more productive? That would be my question.
I think those are great questions to ask. And then on top of it, coming from the place of how you answer questions. Now, I believe in strong cultures within businesses, family units, things of that nature. I'm not big on the fan of having the poster with, having this integrity as number one or whatever, things of that nature. But if you can make decisions based on your value set of an organization that you have espoused to be or actually live, you make those decisions based on those values. And normally 99% of the time you're going to come out in a good place, even when making difficult decisions. And so I think it's really important for leaders to kind of embrace that piece. And then it makes decision making easier. So go to who you are at the core, and you know that you're going to have difficult decisions to make, but at the same time, base them on that foundation that you've built. Or if you haven't built it and you have it just on the wall, start living those things.
Powerful. Kevin?
Well, I love the points that have already been raised. I think what I would add to that, two things. One, this is the time to be as empathetic as you've ever been in your life, right? This is the time to just turn up the empathy and to be as flexible as you can, realizing that everybody's somewhere different and everybody's on a different point of this spectrum, this continuum, and meet them where they are rather than trying to require them to come to you.
Mm-hmm. You can't
I love
help
that.
from a place of judgment.
Yeah.
Right.
So true.
Some of the comments that we got were, so from Andrew, I found that people in general were more communicative, more open, and that allowed me to get to know the person and to be real. Let's see. I think it was Josie who said EQ and an upgrade on EQ is something that's going to come out of this, and she doesn't want it to go away. Shelley said, I have a list of intentions every day, and I want to continue with this list, writing letters, creative time, more time to meditate. Yeah, and Andy says, I gain better control of my time, or my biggest priorities, and I'll be retaining that control as much as possible. Isn't that interesting? While at one point we were losing complete control of the environment around us, we may have actually gained more control of the things that really mattered most.
I tell you what, I've whether it's the family dinner or whatever, I've got a 14 and a 17-year-old, and my 14-year-old daughter, we started about 2 weeks ago now. We've gone for a walk every night, just me and her. And I got to tell you, it is one of the most special times of my day. And we leave the rest of the family at home, and it's just me and my daughter's time. And to have a conversation, number one, with a 14-year-old daughter is always impressive. And that it's not a fight. But it is, and we've talked about everything. And you know what, if we were in the rat race, or we were running to volleyball practice, or we were going to basketball games with my son, or we're finishing up homework, or dad's working late, mom's doing her thing, and we're all kind of doing this thing, we never had this opportunity. And now I look forward, one, I need to walk more, because obviously I'm not, so I've been on that pandemic reach into that refrigerator like every 30 seconds to make sure that I haven't eaten in 30 seconds. But just to get out there and clear your mind, and then have a conversation and you really get to hear what's going on in her mind and how they're dealing with this, but then just views on life and views on being a 14-year-old young woman that's growing, and what transpires in that mind. I would have missed that. Absolutely would have missed that if it wasn't for these 7 weeks. And I'm grateful that I have that opportunity to do that, and shame on me for not taking that opportunity prior to that and seeing that as an opportunity, because I'm working till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, or I'm up out of the house at 5:30 or 6 in the morning, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. And we're still there, but it gets back to what you're saying earlier. Many of you are saying is be in the moment now. Yeah, it's easy to say, but when you're in it, you're running. And this has just forced us to have that different type of relationship. It takes it to a new level, even with the people that we love the most.
I'd love to start rounding out and closing out with each one of you giving kind of a positive, 1 or 2 sentences of encouragement for those who are watching, could be struggling right now. Just something that maybe comes to you that you'd like to share with them. Let's start with Andy. Let's start with Kevin.
Can I go a little more than 2 sentences?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes. Oh, yeah, that story from the beginning.
Yeah,
let's hear it.
Episode 140 was a conversation with Bob Chapman. And the next day, I receive a message on LinkedIn from someone I didn't know. And it came as, an in-mail from Tiana. And it said that, wow, what a powerful conversation. I've listened to it twice already. It won't be the last I listen. And it really inspired me, or there was some new thinking. Well, if you know me, those of you that know me know I just couldn't leave that alone. I leaned in and I said, Tiana, could you tell me more? Was there something specific? And then she responded and she said, well, 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to meet Bob Chapman, and he autographed my book, Bob's book, Everybody Matters. And in it, he wrote, Tiana, there is hope, Bob. And she said, that has become, I've made that the home screen on my phone.
Wow.
And I said, oh, would you send me a screenshot of that, right? Would you take a picture and send it to me? And she sent it to me, and she's from Switzerland, and so this power of connection. And so I sent that to Bob, and I said, Bob, you signed this lady's book 2 years ago. I have no idea why you were signing books. There is hope. And I'm pretty sure that when you signed a book 2 years ago, you had no idea the power those 3 words would have for somebody in an unforeseen situation as this global pandemic, right? And since then, Tiana and I've had multiple conversations. She's showing up at the hangouts I host and, enjoying in conversation. But it all started because she had listened to a podcast and she shared there was something that inspired me. And I was just so curious, I had to hear, but there is hope. That's what I would leave you with. There is hope.
Gary, what about you?
I think for me, what's coming up, Heather, is for anyone that might be struggling a little bit at the moment is this. I can't say this is my quote. I can't remember who gave it to me, but it really resonates deeply with me. Is your self-worth is not the same as your net worth. So whatever's going on for you right now, you don't have to give away your power to things outside of you, even as difficult as it gets. So just remember you are enough and be kind to yourself.
Love it. Sarah.
Well, after Andrew's comment about feeling more connected with people and not, I had to dig into that a little bit because I thought of an analogy. Anyone who has kids, when you're sitting in the front seat of the car and the kids are in the car seats in the back, they have a tendency to talk about things that they wouldn't talk about with you face to face. It's because they can't see your face, they can't see your expressions, they don't necessarily know how you're reacting to it. And I remember vividly some of the conversations I had with my boys when they were in the back seat of the car that they never would have shared certain things with me that they shared because we're in the car. And I think that that's what's happening here, is that because you're not face to face, you feel safer, even though you're on video, you feel safer to share things that you wouldn't otherwise share because you've invited people into your home. Whatever they're seeing behind you, that's your home, and they see your cat and they see your kids. And I'd encourage you to remember that when you can meet face to face again, that vulnerability doesn't go away just because you're face to face. And hold on to it and encourage it and live in that moment, especially with your kids.
Adam, what about you?
Wow, these are fantastic. Since we are on the topic of podcasts, I had Dave Meltzer, somebody I hold in really high regard. He's kind of like my spiritual spirit animal. I had him on my live show early on, I think about 2 weeks into lockdown, and he said something that really that I repeat daily. And he used the analogy. Remember when we used to get on airplanes? Remember back in the day when we used to fly places? But when you get on the airplanes and the flight attendant would go through the safety routine, and they always say, in case of a sudden loss of cabin pressure, put your mask on first before the child or person next to you. And that really resonated because what that means is you need to be your best self and make sure that you're 100% so you can help everyone else that, and that's the mantra that I kind of repeat daily is to be my best self, put in all those daily techniques, really show up for my family and day in and day out. And yes, as we talked about, we're going to have the meltdowns. We're going to have the panic attacks. I mean, I have my own, I talked about too. But those are all going to make you stronger. And the next piece I talk about is calluses, right? The difference between scars and calluses. And right now we're building up those calluses, all of us. My 8-year-old daughter is building up calluses that she never had. My 2-year-old son, I mean, he doesn't know. And my daughter is really understanding what it means to be resilient. And she's going to be able to build on these calluses and rely on them later in life. And these are the positives that are coming out of it. And we have to continue to pray for the people that are less fortunate, the people that are sick, the people that are dying. Look out for our fellow man and look out for everybody at home and in our community. Thanks, Heather.
Yes,
awesome.
Thank you. Greg, I think, did you give us a positive note yet?
I didn't, but do you mind if I read a very quick poem that I wrote the other day?
Yeah,
that I
no, please do.
So, I posted a poem. I love to write. I have a series on LinkedIn called Smack Dab in the Middle of Life. And I just started writing a poem. I'm not really a poet. So this is my first poem I think I ever wrote. So it's called Ode to the COVID. It's the middle of the night when I write. The hand on the clock ticks and talks. We will survive this, one mocks. Will we survive this, one mocks? Time seems suspended during the night. Days lately have given us much fright. This moment is bigger than all of us, feeling we've been run over by that bus. I sit in the dark and I reflect on time. This time, it's all mine. The family sleeps without a peep. Can I take some time just to weep? I sit and ask myself questions I have no answers to. I just want to know, will we get through? I listen to the hum of the AC, searching for something I can be, thinking about life, love, people, money, business, and of course, will that COVID miss us? And Frank and Viktor Frankl is who I will turn to. They will know just what to do. We've all gone through the stages. We all have not agreed with these changes. Some people have become heroes. Others can only look out the windows. I sit with some worry. I try to leave those thoughts in a hurry. If you are hurting and feel like screaming, hang in there. Better days will soon be here. Lessons learned will begin to take hold. You will thrive from all this cold. Build yourself up. Fill that cup. Better days are just ahead. Believe it in your mind, especially in this kind of bind. You will mourn your awful loss until you sob. You will find that job. You will find that meaningful work. You will find that happiness to uncork. You have the courage to endure. They will find a cure. All day I'm tasked to lead. But what does that really mean? Today it means I give you hope. You are now empowered so you can cope. When you stare at that mirror, smile back with vigor. Better times are definitely nearer. The mouths you need to feed will eat. One way or the other, you will not be beat. Onward and up is what I say, keeping those negative thoughts at bay. I believe in you. Put on your wings and fly. Now is not the time to say goodbye. People need you more than ever. Your love and your heart is forever. Ode to the COVID is not for the virus. That would be undesirous. This ode is for you, knowing that you will make it through.
Wow. Powerful. Okay, I'm tearing up. Tearing up on live, LinkedIn Live. Here we go. You can't get any more live than this. There's no editing this, guys. There's no editing it. That was amazing. Thank you so much for that. I do have people that are on here, thanking us for the positive words we've given. Andrew, I saw your question related to mental health. I think there's going to be a huge amount of mental health issues that come from this that we're all dealing with, that every single one of us, even the strongest of us, may be going through right now, as Greg talked about with his panic attack earlier. And the good thing is that we're in this together. So we are not alone, as Greg talked about, as we've all talked about, and we can get through all of this stuff, the stuff that's here, the stuff that's left over together. And I think that's critical. Just reach out to all of us, because none of us we're not alone. And that's, to me, the most heartwarming part of all of it, is I know that we're all in this. I can reach out and be like, okay, here's where I'm at today. Here's what's going on with me today. And I think that the people that are responding here, that's pretty much what you're going to get when you reach out to anybody. So this has been amazing. I'm so glad I did this. I knew there'd be richness in every single one of your voices. Don't forget to subscribe to everybody's podcast. We got Kevin Monroe with Higher Purpose. We've got Sarah Elkins with Your Stories Don't Define You podcast. We got Adam Posner with the Podcast. We got Greg Brenner with Everyday People. And then we got Gary Turner with Value Through Vulnerability, boosted by Humans First. And of course, mine, Leadership with Heart. It's been great. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you, Heather.
Love you all, and just be well.
Out there too. Thank you so
much.
Thank you, Heather.
Be well.
Thank you.